The wheels on the bus go round and round. Let's get started. Hi, hello, and welcome into the Ball Don't Lie podcast, episode number 170-something, 171, I want to say. Thanks so much for being here. I really do appreciate it. If you're new here, my name's Auty, Austin Elmore. Many people call me Auty, and this is my little passion project. This is my Bengals podcast. It's called Ball Don't Lie. I started this podcast several years ago. It's covered everything from COVID-19 to Reds baseball to the MLB All-Star Game to the NFL and the Super Bowl and the national championship game in college football and so much more. Whatever I'm thinking about or whatever going on in my world, that's when I do the podcast, so that's what I want to talk about. And I've changed it this year, over the past year, to be a Bengals-only podcast. And that's just what I think about the most. That's what I care about the most. That's what I'm most interested in. So for that reason, that's what this is. And I'm saying that because, and kind of reintroducing the podcast, because we're now past the 1 year mark from when I restarted the podcast. I took a break for a couple of years to focus on my job, and now I'm back to doing this and focusing on this a little bit more. And it's been just over a year since I started doing the podcast again, and there's been a ton of great feedback. There's been a ton of great growth. It obviously has been derailed a couple of times from things happening in my life that were unforeseen, but I'm really pleased with where things are at now, a year into the reboot of Ball Don't Lie. So if you're listening, if you've been here the whole time, if you're new here, thank you. I really do appreciate it, and I am excited to see what we can continue to do with it. Now, as far as the Bengals are concerned, there's not a lot going on. It's that time. You're doing draft meetings. You're getting set for the combine. There's the Senior Bowl coming up. You've got the college all-star games. Start doing some draft visits and all that other stuff. There's a bunch of players that hadn't fully declared for the NFL draft until a week or so ago. There was a deadline that had to happen. There's a different deadline for the national championship players and all that. But it is the relatively quiet part of the offseason. It's the information gathering part of the offseason as far as the Bengals are concerned. But there are two things percolating that I want to talk about. I'm going to talk about those two things. I'm going to play a little bit of audio for you, and I'm going to answer your questions. I haven't done this in a long time, and you can tweet at me and use the hashtag BDL. You can swipe up or reply to my Instagram stories that I posted and put a question in there, and we have a few of them. I'll get to those at the end. That's the format, or that's the plan for today's show. Let's start with this. The Buffalo Bills fired Sean McDermott, and they did so after another really good season in which they got to the postseason, in which they won a playoff game. And that's been the MO of Sean McDermott really for the last 9 years. You know, when he got to Buffalo, they hadn't made a playoff appearance or hadn't won a playoff game in 18 years. And since then, Buffalo has been on the precipice of the Super Bowl twice. They've had multiple double-digit win seasons. They've got Josh Allen winning an MVP. There's a lot of good things to take about the turnaround that Sean McDermott led with the Buffalo Bills. But after another divisional round loss, this time at the hands of the Denver Broncos, Sean McDermott was relieved of his duties for the Buffalo Bills. And it immediately, in our town, and especially because every other coach in the AFC North has been fired, it immediately comes to Zach Taylor and whether or not Zach Taylor and the Bengals should still be together in this marriage, or whether or not the Bengals should have fired Zach Taylor. Now, they've made their decision. He's not going to be fired. But what comes into light in situations like this are Buffalo and Baltimore and other teams across the NFL being uber aggressive to make sure that they don't miss out on their Super Bowl window. And that means surrounding their franchise quarterback with the best coach, the best play callers, the best staff, whatever it might be. And they have reached a point in Baltimore and Buffalo where they say, okay, we don't feel like John Harbaugh and Sean McDermott can push us over the top, and we don't feel like together with our quarterback that's the right marriage, and so we're going to be aggressive now and move on from our coach in hopes of finding the right guy to come in here. And they should be applauded for that. That's the right mentality. That's the right mindset to have. But for Bengals fans, it is a stark comparison to running it back with Zach Taylor again for what will be his 8th season in the NFL. Now, again, Sean McDermott was there for 9 years, and Sean McDermott has not accomplished as much as Zach Taylor as far as advancing through the postseason. His quarterback didn't get there until a year after him, kind of like Sean McDermott. There are similarities, but there are differences. Baltimore, John Harbaugh was there for a long time, was an established coach for a long time prior to Lamar Jackson even being there, has had multiple MVPs with Lamar Jackson, and still can't advance beyond the AFC Championship game and was there just once. If you're wondering, Sean McDermott went to 2 AFC Championship games. John Harbaugh under Lamar Jackson went to 1. And Zach Taylor has gone to 2 with Joe Burrow. That's the other thing, too, is the idea of coaches and quarterbacks not winning a Super Bowl together after year 5. This is a stat that's out there and is being talked about a lot across the NFL, and it makes you wonder because it just hasn't happened. After the 5th year, a coach and a quarterback together, they have never won the Super Bowl together. And so, obviously, this was the 6th season in Joe Burrow's career, and Zach Taylor has been there for 7 as he was the head coach starting in 2019. And so I get where people are coming from, but I would also say this. There really have only been 3 full seasons in which Zach Taylor and Joe Burrow have been together. And I understand where people are coming from, and we cannot ignore the elephant in the room, which is Joe Burrow's injuries. Like, that's a huge part of his story. It's a huge part of the offseason. It's a huge part of the identity of the Bengals right now is, can Joe Burrow stay healthy? And I'm not trying to make an excuse for him because obviously the best ability is availability, and for the most part, Joe hasn't been available. Now, I remain steadfast in my belief that the injuries are not really his fault. And they've been bad luck, and they've been whatever you want to call it, not necessarily the fault of Joe Burrow. Maybe the calf injury was, and that affected him for a while, but he rebounded in 2023 and played pretty well before the freak wrist injury knocked his season off the rails. But I just wanted to go through a couple of numbers for you because, you know, when it comes to like the comparison of the Bengals and the Bills went to the playoffs every single year with Josh Allen. They never won an AFC Championship game. The Bengals have gone with a fully healthy Joe Burrow, have gone to the postseason 2 out of those 3 years. And the 1 year they didn't certainly wasn't Joe Burrow's fault. More on that in a second. But the fact that the Bills never won the AFC Championship game, they never even had a chance to play in the Super Bowl, I think works against Sean McDermott. McDermott and the Bills were also 0-7 in overtime, and 3 of those losses came in the postseason. 3 postseason losses in overtime, including this past weekend against Denver. That is something that is generally a reflection of the coach, whether you believe it to be true or whether you believe it should be or not. I mentioned also that Josh Allen has won an MVP. He's regarded as one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. Joe Burrow has never won an MVP award. And Lamar Jackson has won multiple MVP awards under John Harbaugh, and still those guys weren't able to get as far as Zach Taylor and the Bengals did. I'm just providing context. I'm not really laying out this big argument. I'm just trying to compare the two. And it's been 9 years. Is it ultimately time to move on? And you still have Josh for an extended amount of time, and you still have this window, and you're in a division now where the Patriots all of a sudden are right there at the top, and it makes you think, okay, we got to be aggressive here or else we're going to lose our spot at the top of the AFC East to the New England Patriots. And so I think because of that, it all just kind of makes sense that now maybe is the time to move on from Sean McDermott. Now, if you ask a Bills fan, it's not about McDermott, it's about the GM, Brandon Beane, which is also very similar to Cincinnati, where a lot of Bengals fans, they don't like Zach Taylor, but a lot of them blame Duke Tobin for the way that the team has performed over the last couple of years as well, and understandably so. So let's talk about Joe Burrow for a second. As I mentioned, he's had 3 total seasons in which he's been fully healthy. In those 3 total seasons, those Bengals have gone to the AFC Championship game, they've gone to the Super Bowl, to the AFC Championship game, and missed the playoffs. You might remember that 2024 season when Burrow probably would have won the MVP or at least been close had they even just made a playoff appearance. They won 5 games in a row. They missed out on the playoffs on the very last day of the season when Kansas City rested their starters against Denver. That's what happened. And so, inexcusable. as far as I'm concerned, and that's going to stick in the craw of Bengals fans for a long time, that they never made the postseason in that 2024 year when Burrow and Chase were unreal, and Jamar Chase obviously had the Triple Crown as a wide receiver. But in those 3 seasons, Joe Burrow has a total record of 31-18. 31-18 when he has been fully healthy. He has completed 69% of his passes in that time. That's elite of elite completion percentage. He's averaging 4,668 yards per season through the air. That is, again, as good as it gets anywhere in the National Football League. He's averaging 37 touchdown passes per season and 11 interceptions. Obviously, the interception numbers are a little bit high, and that was skewed by 1. But in those 3 seasons, as I mentioned, 2 playoff appearances, a Super Bowl appearance, and 1 season missed over 3. It just goes to show that when Joe Burrow is fully healthy, the Bengals are a different football team. They missed him at the end of 2023 when they were starting to hit their stride. They obviously missed him for a good chunk of 2025 when it was ugly. The 2020 season, maybe not exactly the same because it was his rookie year and that team wasn't any good. But when you have Joe Burrow fully healthy for a full season, the Bengals can be seen as a legitimate contender. You saw how good they were when he came back right away this year. They probably should have beaten Buffalo if not for a couple of fluke plays. So, for that reason, I'm saying if you look at it through that 5-year rule of coaches and quarterbacks don't win a Super Bowl past year 5 together, shouldn't this upcoming season technically be year number 4? If Burrow is fully healthy and they're able to go through the whole season, wouldn't that actually technically only be the 4th season in which Burrow is fully healthy and those two are together? I don't know. Just a thought. The other issue that's percolating with the Bengals is Dan Pitcher, the Bengals offensive coordinator, is interviewing for some coaching positions. The first one he interviewed for was the head coach of the Cleveland Browns. Doesn't seem like he's going to get that job. I don't believe he's been brought back for a second interview. The second thing is he's been interviewing for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers offensive coordinator position. Now, based off everything I just said, you might be wondering, why would you make a lateral move to go from Cincinnati to Tampa to be an offensive coordinator there? And the difference, of course, is calling plays. Zach Taylor is the play caller in Cincinnati. Dan Pitcher is not. And there is an obsession among people who hire coaches that you have to have play calling experience. I don't know that I necessarily believe in that. I don't know that it's necessarily the right thing to do. There are a lot of coaches, successful coaches in the NFL, that don't call plays. But it is something, I think maybe the Sean McVay effect, the Kyle Shanahan effect, whatever you want to call it, those guys that call plays are highly sought after, especially as offensive-minded coaches. And so if you want to, wow. You just got a dry spot right in the middle of my throat. My apologies. So if you want to be a head coach in the NFL, it seems to be a prerequisite that you would need to call plays. And Dan Pitcher is interviewing with Tampa because he knows he's in Cincinnati. He's not going to get a chance to call plays. And from everybody that I've talked to, it doesn't seem like that is ever going to change. Doesn't feel like Zach Taylor is going to change and give up the play calling duties. I want to play for you a clip from Cincy 360, Tony Pike's Cincy 360, if you believe in that. On Tuesday of this week, which would have been January the 20th, we had our friend Joe Daneman from Fox 19 in Cincinnati on the show. And I asked him, we were talking about this, I brought up the idea of Zach Taylor's ego. I brought up the idea of play calling and this Dan Pitcher and this whole situation. Enough about me. You listen to the clip and let me know what you think from Joe Daneman. Dan Pitcher is interviewing with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers for their offensive coordinator job. That's his job here, but there he would be able to call the plays. What do you make of this, and do you think that's something that Zach Taylor should reconsider in an effort to keep the continuity that would be Dan Pitcher?
It's not only considering to keep the continuity, it's also if Dan Pitcher does leave, how do you get someone to come to Cincinnati and take on that role if they're not going to be play caller? I say good on Dan Pitcher. It feels like this cycle may go by with head coaching without him getting an opportunity to be a head coach. The next level for him is to prove he's that guy when calling plays, and I think he probably needs to go out and, if that opportunity is there in Tampa, to take that opportunity to continue on his career. I can tell you this from conversations with Dan Pitcher. He's one of the most intelligent people in that building, and that's someone the Bengals do not want to lose. But if he has to do this for his career, then who's going to be the one to stand in his way and say he shouldn't take this job and a chance to call plays? Now, if he does leave, where do the Bengals go, and how does Zach Taylor make this an attractive job for someone who's not going to come in and call plays? Now, certainly you can fall right back on the relationship he had with Brian Callahan, and Brian Callahan is available, and that would seem to be the easy fit. But for an organization that's trying to do everything it can to find change in the margins, is bringing back Brian Callahan the right move and the right message to the send to the fan base? Quite honestly, I'm not sure they care what the message is in that situation of bringing back Brian Callahan. I know Zach likes working with him. I thought Brian Callahan did a great job in Cincinnati. So while it might seem a bit stale and eye-rollish for the fan base to bring him back if Dan Pitcher were to leave, I think Zach Taylor would feel very comfortable. Would he also feel comfortable hiring from within and promoting from within? A Brad Cragthorpe would be a name to watch for if Dan Pitcher left as well. So in this scenario, I think it's important for Dan Pitcher to get to the next level of experience and calling plays. But it's a really hard thing for Zach Taylor to make that job attractive to someone who hasn't been in the organization.
Zach gave an answer not that long ago about why he likes working with Duke Tobin, and he said that there is no ego whatsoever with Duke Tobin. I look at the way Zach is stubborn, I guess you could say, with the play calling process, and see that as ego. He's not willing to give up that part of his process. Is that misguided on my part? You're around Zach a lot more than most people are. Do you feel like there's an ego involved in that, or is that just this is what he feels like the best way to be successful is?
I believe your statement is fair to say that there's a bit of ego involved, but I think anybody in any scenario where their job relies on execution of whatever that job is, in Zach Taylor's case, being an offensive head coach, him having control of what goes on with the offensive play calling is one of those things, and we all do it at work, that if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it myself. If I'm going to go down, I'm going to go down knowing I did it my way. And if that's ego, then that's fair. And I think anybody who gets to rise to the level of head coach in the NFL, ego is a part of that, and ego can be a good thing. In this case, it's one of those things that seems to pop up every other year where there's a question, okay, is this now the time where Zach Taylor is going to give up play calling? It kind of feels like that ship has sailed. And I'm not sure Zach Taylor is ever going to give that up. Obviously, he likes doing it, and I think also at the same time, it's one of those things, if this is going to be my only chance to be a head coach in the NFL, I'm going to do it my way. And if it's going to go down, I'm going to go down doing it my way. And if that's ego, that's ego, and that's on him. And now it is on him in this coming season to help this team get back to where they want to go. Now, is he perfect as a play caller? Of course not. Is he perfect as a head coach? He's not. But again, at the same time, you can also look at if he's part of the brains behind the offense has not been the problem in recent years for Cincinnati not making the playoffs. So of all the finger pointing and all the reasons the Bengals haven't made the playoffs and haven't met expectations, the offense and offensive play calling, while not perfect, is lower on my list of things that need to be fixed, need to be addressed, need to be looked at with urgency. But also at the same time, going back to the last point we discussed, if the Bengals are trying to bring in someone who can help them get to a next level, it doesn't all have to be on defense. It certainly can be on the offensive side of the ball. And if they're going to try to attract someone to come in here and be a difference maker on offense, then maybe you do have to relinquish something like that. I just don't see it happening. So I don't want to sit here and say it's not worth discussing, because certainly it's a great talk radio point and very worth discussing in this platform. But at the same time, I just don't think it's going to change. And therefore, you can label it whatever you want, ego or just someone believing in himself and wanting to do it his way. Either way you do it, it's going to continue working this way in Cincinnati with Zach Taylor calling plays.
Well, I think Joe Danneman sums it up pretty nicely right there. And it doesn't seem like it's going to change. I don't know that the answer is in the building. Maybe it is going to be Brian Callahan. I don't get too excited about that, but I understand if you want to keep the theme of continuity and comfortability, I understand that. And maybe Brian Callahan has learned some things since he failed in Tennessee. I don't know. But I just think that, to me, feels like a bit of an ego issue and a bit of a blind spot. And as Joe mentioned, it's not the Bengals' biggest issue. And I feel like I'm nitpicking things on offense because the big issue is always going to be the defense until they figure that out. But just being honest, I feel like there's some stuff there, or something there that could be an issue. And as I mentioned in previous episodes, just the operational clean it up part of the Bengals. Can you please fix that? And maybe play calling has something to do with that. That's just my mindset. All right. I haven't done this in a while, but I asked for your questions on Instagram and on Twitter at Auty Elmore, AutyElmore. So let's get to a couple of those right now. Let's start with Twitter. Chris in the Valley wants to know, college football question. Is Curt Cignetti a better coach than Ryan Day right now? 2 years, 91% winning percentage, national championship, all with just 4 stars on the squad. Has done more with less. Just curious how you have them ranked in the Big Ten and nationally. Well, I don't know that he's done more with less. They both have one national championship. Ryan's been to a couple of national championships. Curt Cignetti is the best coach in college football right now. I'm pretty confident in saying that. I think Ryan Day is, speaking of blind spots, somebody who has quite a few of them, especially when it comes to offensive play calling. Don't get me started on that. Curt Cignetti is the best coach in college football, and what he did with Indiana is unbelievable. Like, truly one of the best, if not the best, sports stories ever told. Hard to fathom exactly what went on in Bloomington over the last 2 years. And so, yeah, as of right now, I don't know how you could make an argument for otherwise. What Curt Cignetti has been able to do, yeah, I agree. Cincinnati wants to know, how poorly does it reflect on the Bengals that they are willing to lose a good OC to a lateral move just so that said OC can start calling plays during the game just to keep Zach Taylor as play caller? Well, when you put it like that, Cincinnati, makes a lot of sense, and I think we just covered most of that in the show. Kevin in Northern Kentucky wants to know, Bengals' inability to get calls in on time. Why is that? I wish I knew, Kevin. One of my big questions with the Bengals that I don't know if I'm ever going to get an answer to is, what exactly is the process like? Like, day-to-day, game day, how do you collaboratively come up with the play calls, and how does that work on game day? And what's that communication like? How much input does Dan Pitcher have? How much input does Brad Cragthorpe have? How much conversation is going on with Zach Taylor? How much does Joe Burrow have to say about it? Like, I would love to know the ins and outs of that so I could better answer the question. I have my theories, and I think part of it is you just get distracted and there's other stuff going on as a head coach that you don't get the call in on time, and you just kind of trust that Joe Burrow will figure it out. I don't think that's a sustainable or apt way to go about doing things, but it is, I guess, something that goes on. I wish I had a better understanding of that. I don't know that we'll ever really get that from anyone, to be completely honest. All right, let's go over to Instagram, get some of these questions. First one. This was from, what's up, Connor? Connor Lamons wants to know, what are some things you love about the cities of Cincinnati and Columbus for you personally? Wow. I love everything about Cincinnati. I love that it's a small, big city. Like, it is very much a community feel. No one ever leaves, and if they do leave, they come back, which, you know, in a sense can make it hard for transplants like myself. But I love that it feels like a really small, big city. You get the big city feel, but it also feels like a small town. That's what I love about it. Cincinnati also is just an incredible and emerging food scene. Like, they have some of the best restaurants in Ohio, some of the best restaurants in the country. Like, the food scene in Cincinnati, everybody wants to make fun of Skyline Chili. Everybody wants to talk about that. But it's more than that. Like, it is a legitimate food town. For Columbus, I love that there's, like, you know, on one hand, Cincinnati is kind of a quiet and calm big city. Columbus, there's an energy about it. And, I mean, it's hard to beat the German Village, Short North. Like, there's just this bustling energy about Columbus that I really love. I haven't been there enough lately. I miss Columbus. And so I don't know that I can give you a good enough answer. The obvious one would be Buckeye Donuts, which is, I mean, come on. And they have some pretty good restaurants as well. Maybe not at the same level of Cincinnati, but I do like the energy of Columbus. Andrew wants to know, have you ever considered expanding the Ball Don't Lie coverage to include live post-game of NFL games? I've thought a lot about the potential of live streaming. I maybe want to do that in the future. I don't know that I want to do it right away after NFL games, because I do that for work sometimes, and I just don't know if I want to do that for like live post game. Maybe, but like maybe, you know, Twitter Spaces or an Instagram Live or something like that, instead of just specifically Ball Don't Lie. But it is something that's on my plate, and I do appreciate you asking that question. Jason wants to know, biggest first round need, safety or defensive end? This is kind of like the Reuben Bain or Caleb Downs question, right? That we're going to be talking about a lot over the next couple of months. Right now, I would say the biggest need is safety, because Geno Stone is ass, and they have nobody to play behind him. You at least have a couple of decent players on the defensive line. That being said, I don't know that that's going to be the right pick in April when the draft comes around. Depending on what happens with free agency, depending on what goes on with contracts, all that other stuff, no guarantee that that's going to be the right decision come April when the draft happens, or late April when the draft happens. As of right now, though, I think the biggest need is safety. All right, what else we got? Here we go. Tyson wants to know, what's up, T-Money? Thoughts on the Bears game and their run through the playoffs coming from a Bears game. I've said it before, Caleb Williams does not play well within the structure of the offense. But when he's outside of the structure, he is like Patrick Mahomes. It's unbelievable, the arm talent and the uncanny ability to make a play, and a difficult throw. And I think the Bears are a fun team. They were obviously ultimately killed by their defense just not being able to get a stop. But if they build that defense, I'm not fully convinced that Green Bay is on an upward trajectory. I wonder if things are getting stale in Minnesota, and they have a horrible quarterback in J.J. McCarthy. Detroit feels like they're at kind of a bit of a tipping point. So this is an opportunity for Chicago to take the division. I think they had a good season. I think Bears fans are thrilled with it. I think they consider it a success because you nearly knocked off the Rams, but you beat the Packers in the playoffs, and that's really probably what they care about the most. So I think the Bears are fun. I found myself rooting for them. I've never been a Caleb Williams guy. I don't like Caleb Williams. But I got to respect that the dude has been making some plays. And he's starting to win me over a little bit. Which, you know, that doesn't happen very often. Last one. This one's from Brian. Not too early for a couple of mock drafts. Yes, it is, Brian. Yes, it is. It is only January. We won't be doing any mock drafts, at least not anytime soon. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Ball Don't Lie podcast. If you liked what you heard, please subscribe to it. Please share it with somebody else. Leave a rating if you're that type of person. I would really appreciate it. Please follow me on all social media if you don't already, at Auty Elmore. That's AUTYELMORE. We'll talk to you again next week. As always, have fun. Be safe. Go Bucks.